Hey there, guys. Alright, today we are back with some more History Matters. This time, we're going with another short animated documentary. However, it's one of their longer short documentaries, only 6 minutes long. The last ditch attempt to save the USSR, August coup of 1991. Before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love it if you joined the Discord and followed me over at Twitch. Been playing, well, actually, by the time this goes out, will I still be playing Victoria 3? I'm trying to do the math in my head as to when this is. No, I think when this gets uploaded, I will still be playing Victoria 3 for like a day or two more, and then it'll be God of War Ragnarok. But yeah. Man, it's gonna be, because this was 1991. 7 years and 4 months. 4 months before I was born. It's gonna be weird when YouTubers start making history videos of stuff that happened in my lifetime. I mean, it's already somewhat happening, but they're not like super popular. But like soon they will be, and that's gonna be weird for me. I'm not. Can we just like not do history post 1996? Please. All right. Let's go ahead and dive right in.
As 1991 was reaching its end, the Soviet Union, the world's second superpower, was in the process of catastrophic political collapse. This outcome had been fairly apparent for over a year now, and the Soviet president, Mikhail Gorbachev, had tried numerous policies to preserve the USSR.
Be less bad. Fix your stuff.
These included
Gorbachev's like, I can fix him.
widespread reforms, notably glasnost, which opened up the press, allowing for
Turns out, we're poor.
criticism of the government, and perestroika, which reformed the internal operations of the USSR, notably by instigating economic reforms which allowed private enterprise and foreign investment, something which upset many hardline communists. Whilst the collapse of communism there was by late 1990 seen as mostly inevitable, the collapse of the state itself wasn't so certain. In early 1991, as part of Gorbachev's democratic reforms, there was a referendum on whether or not the USSR should be preserved, which was approved by over 3/4 of the people from these areas. The other areas had, to use a technical historical term, noped out and didn't.
Oh my god, I love that term. Nope it out. I'm using that. Whenever there's wars of independence or anything being discussed, I'm just calling it nope it out. Nope it out of the empire. American Revolution of 17 that started around 1776, as you could argue it started a little earlier than that, or you could argue maybe a little bit after. Who's to say? Nope it out. The American War of noping it out. What's another one?
Take part. Now, when I say that people voted to preserve the USSR, I don't mean the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, but a new state, the Union of Soviet Sovereign Republics, which, as the name suggests, didn't have to be communist. Furthermore, a new post was created within the USSR, the president of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, and in July, Boris Yeltsin was elected to that post, something which upset many hardline communists. And so, some high-ranking members of the Communist Party, including Vice President Gennady Yanayev and head of the KGB Vladimir Kryuchkov, decided to intervene. In August of 1991, while Gorbachev was on holiday in Crimea, the plotters leapt into action and placed him under house arrest. He was asked to resign, but he promptly told them no, and so they told the country he was seriously ill and unable to lead. And in response to this, the plotters created the State Committee on the Emergency Situation, led by Yanayev as acting president, which would run the country in the meantime. The Soviet coup had formally begun. The coup began with tanks rolling into Moscow and politicians who were seen as a threat being quickly arrested, with one notable exception, Boris Yeltsin. The committee quickly shut down all critical newspapers and broadcasted what they were going to do.
Everything is fine. Don't ask questions. Don't ask questions.
They were going to fix the economy, restore the Communist Party to its rightful place, take back control of the parts of the country that wanted to break away, and finally
that wanted to nope it out.
Win the Cold War. Sounds lovely, yet despite this rhetoric, the people running the country didn't have any plans on how to do this except for stop the reforms. This new leadership was incredibly worrying to the wider Soviet citizenry, and was especially so to the press and anyone who had criticized communism recently. since there was an expectation that the new leaders would begin a purge once they'd cemented their position. An expectation that wasn't entirely without merit since most of the KGB were on board. Also, the coup had some support from the military, including the defense minister Dmitry Yazov, hence the tanks on the streets. Not all of the
No, I thought that was just his personal tanks. I didn't think that was the military tanks.
military was supportive, though. Notably, the higher-ups in the Air Force were opposed, and there was a severe rift across the armed forces. Military support for the coup didn't stop Soviet citizens from protesting against the change in leadership, and Yeltsin was a notable critic who became a central opponent who called for Gorbachev's restoration.
Gorby, come back.
He was also supported by a sizable part of the Soviet army, who together with some civilians formed a barricade outside the White House. Not that one. In Lithuania, which had declared independence the year before, Soviet troops were still stationed there, and a committee planned for its reintegration into the USSR. Across the USSR, widespread protests and strikes broke out as many politicians, both communist and not, opposed the committee's actions. Furthermore, Western leaders condemned the coup and halted all cooperation with the USSR. Within the Soviet Union, the individual republics were split down these lines, and the committee wasn't without some support internationally. Communist states like Cuba, North Korea and China were supportive of the coup, since they felt that Yunayev and his colleagues were right and they had no interest whatsoever in losing the primary defender of global communism. Things started to heat up as demonstrations became more incensed and there were some isolated incidents of violence. This was also the point where some in the committee realised that they weren't going to be successful. The day was also rounded out by Estonia unilaterally declaring independence, which probably wasn't what the coup leaders were hoping for. Overnight, there was some fighting between soldiers on the side of the committee and those who had sided with Yeltsin's troops withstanding the assault. It was at this point that the rest of the committee realised that they had failed, and some of them subsequently fled Moscow. Yunayev opted to face his fate in Moscow, whereas the rest, barring one because, well, went to see Gorbachev in Crimea in order to hopefully not get purged once he was back in charge. The members of the military which had sided with the committee then switched allegiance and pulled all military forces out of Moscow. The Supreme Soviet, the Soviet Parliament, then announced that the crisis was over and that Gorbachev was restored as president. The coup was over.
Joseph Stalin, remember me as a peacemaker. Soviet coup.
The remaining committee members were quickly rounded up and arrested, and order was restored to the streets of Moscow. There were several reasons for the coup's failure. The first was Gorbachev's refusal to resign, which robbed Yunayev of any legitimacy in the eyes of the public. Another was that the military wasn't entirely on board and politicians like Yeltsin kicked up a fuss. Yet the biggest reason that the coup failed was the people who took to the streets and stared down armed soldiers to prevent a return to the politics of old. Gorbachev's changes were popular and the coup's leaders assumed that taking control of the party meant that they could stop them. Yet, where they miscalculated was that the party was no longer able to override the people and their support for the changes. The coup effectively doomed the Soviet Union and the Communist Party there.
It was actually only one of many complex reasons which led to the decline of Soviet communism. It's mostly just a joke.
And the USSR itself would only last for another 4 months. The leaders of the committee were imprisoned, and Yeltsin would go on to become Russia's first president. The last-ditch attempt to preserve the Soviet system was a failure, and the fact that it didn't spiral into a wider revolutionary conflict is honestly quite amazing.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you for watching.
Okay. Part of me was wondering through this video, part of me kind of wonders how much this played a role in Gorbachev's loss of power and the official dissolution of the USSR. Because as was being stated here at the beginning, Gorbachev was wanting to pretty much rebrand, still keep the USSR largely intact. However, it was no longer just going to be a communist state. It was going to be more democratic. It was going to just be more like the West, I guess you could say. Be more like the USA in a sense. So I wonder if this coup kind of put a nail in the coffin, screwed him over on wanting to pass those reforms, because it kind of started maybe a chain of events of people being unhappy, which led to them calling for more quicker and radical changes, perhaps. I do not know. But that was the last-ditch attempt to save the USSR. August Coup of 1991. Short animated documentary by History Matters. I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.